The city of Havenbrook was nestled amidst towering mountains and dense woods, a picturesque town that seemed frozen in time. For centuries, it had been a haven for its residents. But the autumn of 1987 brought a disaster that would forever change its history. The night sky was an inferno, painted in hues of orange and red as flames engulfed the Harper family home. Firefighter Jack Calloway arrived at the scene, his heart pounding. He had seen fires before, but this was different, more ferocious, almost alive. The smoke curled like claws, tearing at the oxygen. As Jack and his team fought to keep the blaze from spreading to neighboring houses, "Is everyone out?" Jack shouted over the roar of the fire. "The parents and one kid are safe," replied his colleague, Matt. "But the little girl, Sophie, she's still inside." Without hesitation, Jack darted toward the burning house, his axe in hand. The heat was unbearable, like stepping into the sun itself. He found Sophie in her bedroom, a terrified 5-year-old clutching a stuffed bunny, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the flickering flames. "It's okay, sweetheart," Jack said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "I'm here to take you home." Sophie nodded, her small hand gripping his. The journey out was a gauntlet. Flames licked at Jack's gear, and the smoke was so thick he could barely see. But he kept moving, shielding Sophie with his body. They burst out of the house just as the roof collapsed. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Jack barely noticed. He was focused on the trembling child in his arms. As Sophie's parents rushed to her, Jack collapsed on the ground. Exhausted but relieved, Sophie's wide eyes met his, and she whispered, "Thank you for saving me." Decades passed, and Jack's heroic act became a story retold at every town gathering. Sophie Harper grew up, moving away to the bustling city of Fairmont to pursue a career in medicine. Jack, meanwhile, continued his service as a firefighter, though the years took their toll. By the time he retired, he was a shadow of the man who had braved the inferno that fateful night. But destiny wasn't done with Jack and Sophie. It was a cold winter evening in 2023. Jack, now in his 70s, lived alone in a modest house at the edge of Havenbrook. His health had been declining for years. Arthritis in his joints, a heart condition, and the remnants of smoke inhalation that never truly healed. On this particular night, as snow blanketed the ground, Jack sat by the fireplace, sipping tea, when a knock on the door shattered the silence. Opening it, he found a young woman standing there, her face partially obscured by the hood of her coat. "Mr. Calloway?" she asked. "Yes," Jack replied, his voice gruff. "Who's asking?" The woman pulled down her hood, revealing familiar eyes. "I'm Sophie Harper." Jack's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't seen her in over 30 years. Sophie explained that she had moved back to Havenbrook recently and had been meaning to visit him. Jack invited her in, and they spent hours reminiscing about the past. Sophie, now a successful surgeon, had never forgotten the man who saved her life. But Jack was reluctant to talk about his declining health, brushing off her concerns. "It's just old age," he said. "Nothing to fuss over." Sophie wasn't convinced. 1 week later, disaster struck. Jack awoke in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke. His old house, filled with flammable mementos, had caught fire. Panic gripped him as he struggled to get out of bed. His weakened body betrayed him, and he collapsed to the floor. For Jack, it felt like the end. But then, through the haze of smoke, he heard a voice he hadn't expected to hear again. "Mr. Calloway." "Jack, I'm here." It was Sophie. Earlier that night, Sophie had been unable to sleep, a nagging feeling pulling at her. She decided to check on Jack. When she arrived and saw the flames consuming his house, she acted without hesitation. Just as he had decades earlier, Sophie smashed a window to get inside, coughing as smoke filled her lungs. She found Jack on the floor, barely conscious. "Stay with me." "Jack," she said, her voice firm, despite the fire raging around them. Sophie's training as a surgeon kept her calm. She used a blanket to shield Jack from the flames and dragged him out of the house. Just as they made it outside, the house collapsed in a fiery explosion. Jack woke up in a hospital bed, his body aching but alive. Sophie was by his side, her face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "You saved me," Jack whispered. Sophie smiled. It was my turn. But the story didn't end there. As investigators looked into the cause of the fire, they discovered something shocking. It wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately set Jack's house ablaze. The news sent shockwaves through Havenbrook, and the search for the arsonist began. Sophie refused to leave Jack's side, moving him into her home while he recovered. Together, they pieced together clues about who might have wanted to harm him. Jack remembered receiving strange letters in the weeks leading up to the fire. Anonymous notes with cryptic messages like, "You can't escape the past." As Sophie delved deeper, she uncovered a dark secret from Jack's firefighting days. One of the fires he had fought years ago had been linked to a local criminal gang. Jack had unknowingly thwarted their plans, and now, decades later, they wanted revenge. The suspense escalated as Sophie and Jack worked to uncover the arsonist's identity. They faced threats, near misses, and moments where giving up seemed like the only option. But their bond, forged in the flames of their shared past, kept them going. In the end, they uncovered the truth. The arsonist was the son of a gang member Jack had exposed all those years ago. The man had waited decades to exact his revenge, only to be foiled by the very person Jack had saved. As the authorities took the culprit into custody, Jack and Sophie found themselves standing together, watching the sunrise over Havenbrook. "Life has a funny way of coming full circle," Jack said, his voice filled with gratitude. Sophie nodded. "And some bonds are forged to last forever,"